Welcome to the Asian Dating Podcast. I'm your host, May Bugenhagen. I have a part-time podiatrist coming to you today to talk about love, life, and everything in between. Dr. Vivian Vo Okuma. She is a dynamic individual who wears many hats, a dedicated podiatrist, a passionate yoga instructor, and an empowering life coach, specializing in helping you ditch the minority myth and thrive on your own terms with a unique blend of medical expertise and holistic wellness practices. Vivian is on a mission to guide and inspire Asian Americans break free from the constraints of the minority myth, encouraging them to embrace and be their whole selves. Through powerful mental fitness life coaching, Vivian creates lasting, sustainable change. Welcome to the show, Vivian. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for that introduction, May.
It was a mouthful. You've accomplished a lot. It seems like you're passionate about a lot of things, being a part-time podiatrist, being a yoga instructor, and now a life coach. So can you tell the audience a little bit about you, your life, your husband, your animals, whatever, just so they get to know you a little bit before we dive into the topics ahead?
Sure. My focus currently is a mental fitness life coach where I help basically people break free from their limiting beliefs, all the ways that they self-sabotage, whether they're conscious of it or not. And I am also married, recently married. December, I think 2022 is when we got married. And we actually started our relationship, I think just 3 months or 6 months before the pandemic. So 6 months into being with each other, we began sheltering in place and living together. And it was during that time that we got some cats as well. We have two fur babies. And yeah, we're still together. And through my coaching program that I put people through, I actually was able to overcome a lot of things, like a lot of conflict in our relationship. I became kind of less of a stickler of how the house needs to be. Like I used to be more of a control freak in that way. And we've kind of figured out how to communicate so that I can get my needs met and then he can get his needs met. And we're at a really good place in our marriage right now. And yeah.
So how do you talk to your clients about how to communicate with their significant other to make sure their needs are met, so then they communicate and fight and discuss effectively and respectfully?
That is a big question. Well, first, it's kind of like for me, and your listeners might be familiar with this, like I have an avoidant attachment style, and my husband has an anxious attachment style. So basically, when we're in conflict, this was like early on in our relationship, and we were recognizing this about each other. When we would have conflict, I needed to have my own time and space to process and to basically self-soothe. And for him, he wanted to talk things out right then and there. And this is apparently very common. Avoidant people and anxious people just find each other and get into relationships with each other and have this dynamic. And so I had to learn how to tell him that I need space rather than just running away, making him feel abandoned. So I had to learn to be aware that, okay, I need time, I need space, and verbalize that out loud. And he had to learn how to, if I forget to let him know, to invite me to take time for myself. Like, do we need a breather here? Like, can I give you 5 or 10 minutes? And if he remembers that when I don't remember, then that's great. But if I remember to say, let him know what I need, then he'll remember to self soothe. Like, can he take care of himself and let him know that it's not personal that I need time and space? It's for our relationship and we're a team. And once we got over that hump, communicating with each other was so much easier because we both got what we needed. Like he just needed to know that I just need time to calm myself down and to process. And he can take that time to do the same.
So when you take the time to step away from the argument, is it 5 minutes? Is it 5 hours? Is it 10 hours? Like, how long
Mm,
does somebody usually need to say, okay, I'm going to take a breather. Let me just step back a little bit. Like, what is the ideal time you
mm,
think we should take a break from our partner in that instance?
yeah, I think when it comes to mine and my relationship, it depends on how big of a conflict that is. So, like, if I come home from work, I'm exhausted. This is like the memory that's freshest for me. And if like there's dishes in the sink and it's been there all day, then I know I need at least like 10 minutes to talk to him nicely, like, hey, what's going on? I know that that will probably take me 10 minutes to just decompress from work, to soothe myself that, hey, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal. Let's find out what was going on today. Like maybe he had a really busy day. But if it was like a bigger thing where like he was having a hard day and he got triggered from about something and he like reacted to me in like a way that he's never reacted before, which is like he was like maybe mean to me, which is not normal for him, that will hurt me quite deeply because it doesn't really happen. And given my history of being part of like an abusive relationship, for something like that, that's like really triggering for me, I need like 5 hours away. And I usually go for a hike where I usually turn to nature. Um, so and then I come back and then that's when we can talk again. So yeah, I think it depends on like the context and I feel like everyone's different too. Yeah, I'm like different from like other people and like people might have other needs as well. And I know people in similar situations where they can get over things like really quickly. So yeah, I think just tuning in to like what each person needs is really important.
So do you say, hey, you know what? I'm going to just go on a hike. I'll be back. And then we could talk about this later. Or does he know that you just need the time away and you just leave the house without saying bye?
Okay, well, that specific example that came to my mind, I think what I could have done better was let him know that I needed time away because, hey, that was really triggering for me. But what I did and what reality happened was that I just needed to get out of there because I think for me it was like fight or flight and I am flight. So I need to just get away. But yeah, I what I could do better next time is letting him know because I think that was worrisome for him when I did that.
Yeah, I just hate fighting with my husband. We've been married for what, 6, 7 years, and we've been together 16 years. But it's that feeling you get when you fight and then you ignore each other or you don't talk or whatever it may be. And then even though you kind of say, I'm sorry, and you've made up already, you still feel like everything is not 100%, it's not back to normal yet. So what is the quickest way to like make up? Like, what are some
Mm,
magic words that men want to hear that can get us to make up sooner and not have like that awkward feeling after a fight?
ah, oh, so what do men want to hear? For This is really hard for both parties because we have to leave our ego aside. We have to leave our pride aside. And I know that like when I really want things to be better, I it's like the louder voice in me is like, oh, like he needs to say sorry, he needs to do this, third. But there's a whisper inside that's like, hey, like what part are you me, like what part are you responsible for in this? And what he needed to hear is me taking ownership of that part that I was responsible for. Like, oh yeah, okay, so I'm sorry for going, like just leaving without saying anything and making you worried, and I will do better next time. And then as soon as at least one of us do that, it eases things down so much quicker. And it really opens the door and opens the space for him to be like, thank you for saying that. And I'm sorry for like reacting this way and like triggering that part. And then that's what I found has been most effective is like finding that piece that I'm responsible for and acknowledging it to him and like genuinely being sorry.
I can't imagine my husband saying, "Thank you for saying that." Like that, I don't think he's going to say that. He might think that, like, okay, good. She said that. So she took ownership or she apologizes and said that it won't happen again. But I can't see him saying, "Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it." Do you know what I mean? Like, I would
Mm,
like to hear him say, "Thank you for saying that." But
yeah.
I don't think he would or he does. But
Ah,
yeah, anyway, so.
yeah. I think it's okay to ask for it because there was a time when me and my husband would get into conflict, and he would be like, "This is the time where you say sorry." And and then when I genuinely felt sorry, I would say it, but when I was still reactive, I would be like, "I don't feel sorry right now." And I would just be honest, but I'm like, "But maybe I'll be sorry later." And when I did take the time for myself, I was sorry. But yeah, I think it's okay to ask for it. And with him, he he'll what I love about my husband is that if I ask for something that I need, he'll do it, and then I'll be like, "Was it genuine?" And he'll reassure me that it is. So I think that's the anxious side of me. Yeah.
Okay, I like the fact that he goes, "This is where you say you're sorry." So I guess there's some guidance. I mean, I guess if my husband really wanted me to say I'm sorry, if he said that, I'd be like, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry." But gosh, like, is there a way to like diffuse a fight? Like, I feel like saying I'm sorry does diffuse the fight, and then you have to say, "I'll do better. It won't happen again." But you have to make sure that that doesn't happen
Mm,
again, right? Because otherwise your word's not
yes.
going to mean anything. So,
Yes. Yes, I think that I'm the same way. When my husband says I'm sorry and he apologizes, I then ask him, this is like a pattern. This is like our conversation. I then say, "What are you sorry for?" To like be clear, like, are we on the same page? And he'll say it, and then I was like, "Okay, how do you know it won't happen next time?" And then he'll tell me, and then he'll tell me the strategy that he's gonna have in place. And then that's the kind of apologies that make me feel better. Because just a statement, "I'm sorry," that doesn't cut it for me because I'm like, I don't know what you're sorry for.
yeah.
Um, and then that's been helpful is having that conversation. Yeah.
I think when my husband and I fight, and what makes me feel better is almost like the affection piece, where maybe he then
Mm,
touches my hair later, then I'm like, okay, everything's fine. Or, like just maybe a hug or whatever. It's not even like kiss and make up necessary, but it's like maybe just, you know, touching my hair or tapping my shoulder or whatever, like some kind of touch, I feel like really
mm,
diffuses the situation, like a nice, gentle gesture, I guess. Maybe that's my weakness. I don't know, but
yeah. No, me and my husband, we do that too, actually.
yeah,
So after that, sorry, we then awkwardly hug
right.
just just to have that physical closeness.
Yeah.
And that definitely helps. And then like sometimes it's a little awkward, but like we still do it. And then that's right, it diffuses it after
Yeah.
that. And we're like, okay, things feel back to normal-ish, or it's
Yeah.
getting there.
Okay. So I will remember that next time. Maybe I'll get to the hugging, the apologizing, the physical contact sooner. So the fight can like wrap up and then we can move on, because
Yeah.
he does forgive and forget quicker. Like he doesn't hold a grudge or anything like that,
Mm,
which is good, right? I don't want someone who like holds a grudge and then digs this up later. So I get
mhm.
it. I get it. Okay. Okay. So Vivian, tell me a little bit about your clients that you coach, mental fitness life coaching. What is that, and who would be someone like an ideal client that would come to you needing assistance?
Yeah, so the work I do, basically, we kind of dig deep into what exactly is getting in the way. I'll talk about my ideal client, which are like Asian American millennials or like Gen Zs or like little above the millennials. And basically living with this minority myth stereotype and like being feeling bound by it and having to compartmentalize ourselves with like being like a different person at work and at home and like in the community, and like how can we stop compartmentalizing ourselves so that we can just be our true self every single time. And what's getting in the way of that, sometimes it's like, um, I'll talk about the avoider. Like for me, like there's an avoider part of me that's really strong, and whenever there's conflict, I like to flee. I like to leave. There's also like the people pleaser, like doing things for others excessively at the detriment to yourself. Or, for example, there's also like the hyper vigilant, where it's like, oh, like there's vigilance for no reason. Like, okay, like if the person does this and it's seemingly objectively, it's like neutral, but the vigilant part is like, wait, that's a sign that like something's bad gonna happen. So like there's like all these different ways that we self-sabotage. And I work with clients to recognize what's the strongest parts for that person is. And then we like basically make those saboteur voices much quieter, and then we access that deepest, truest part of ourselves and figure out how to make that part of ourselves the loudest part.
So give me an example of a client that
Mm,
what situations would they have and how do they self-sabotage?
okay. Um, so one of my clients, she has a doctorate, and through earning her doctorate, she was in academia, and it was really stressful, very toxic. But she finished it. But the way that she finished it, there was a tone like, oh, you got to finish this or else you're lazy, you can't be a quitter, like all these judging tones and really shaming tones within her. And then she eventually left that field, and she is now building her own business. And basically, there's like a recognition that instead of building this business, like, oh, you're lazy, you got to do this, um, get off the couch, you got to do all these things. And like, instead of that shamey tone, there's a recognition of doing it differently. Like, this is like building her business is like her baby. So it's like, can the tone shift from like a shaming tone to a nurturing, nourishing tone, like a more gentle tone, like, okay, like, I only have enough energy for this today. And then so I can prioritize this way, this time, and it's okay, however much I get done, kind of treating the self more gently and having like self-acceptance for where the client is currently at, rather than comparing themselves to like the next person. Like, oh, well, this person's doing all these things. Instead of that tone, it's like, okay, well, I'm in my own lane and it's okay.
So how do you instruct her to have a more softer tone when she talks to herself? You guys just go through affirmations or you go through a workbook, you go through stories, it's just talking? Like what, how do you get her from A to B?
Okay. Basically, like the whole coaching program, the first step is to recognize that voice that has that tone, the judging, the shaming, the guilt tripping tone, recognize that part. And then the next step is to learn how to shift, basically like activating a different part of the brain. Like it's like the reptilian brain, that's like the judging side, shifting that through like grounding practices. Like it can be deep breathing, it can be meditative like movement, it can be just even simply one technique with the eyes open is like just bringing the fingertips together and just like gently rubbing them together ever so slightly to like feel the finger prints, or even like wiggling the toes, just some way to like bring the attention to the present moment rather than those judging, shaming thoughts, and then shift to a different narrative. And the way to shift to like a self acceptance, more like loving to the self approach, one way is to visualize the self as a child. And I personally have like a picture of myself as a child, like right next to me to like remember all the time that, hey, like I can be kind to myself. And like this part of myself is here. And like, would you treat a little child in the same way of being that judging voice and like kind of speed things along and like, oh, this person's not enough? Like, most of the time, not. For some clients, it is hard to access that, but most of the time, with enough time, there's a gentler approach, a more accepting and loving approach. And there's other techniques too, but I think that's like probably the most effective method.
Yeah, I was doing a meditation. I think it was Louise Hay, is it?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I like
And
her.
it's like a sleeping meditation or whatever at the end of the night. I think it's like 30 minutes. And at one point, she does say, picture yourself as a kid, and then now shrink this image and then just put her in your pocket or something and just be gentle with her and
Oh,
just things like that. So, yeah, I feel like
yeah,
that all that stuff helps, right? And just being aware of it.
yeah,
A lot of times we're not aware of us self-sabotaging things in our own lives and how we speak to ourselves. And it's like you wouldn't even speak to your best friend that way. Like, how come we're speaking so harsh to ourselves, our internal voices,
yeah,
right? So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, can we treat ourselves and speak to ourselves in our heads the same way we would speak to our best friends or our loved ones?
right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me a little bit about you being Asian American. Before you got married, you were dating in California. I know you and your husband met on an app. Like, what was your journey from being a successful Asian American woman and dating? Like, was it tough dating on an app? Like, what did you only want to date Asian American men or Asian men that were not Americanized, or were you open to Caucasian guys or other ethnicities?
Hmm. So I'm like trying to think about my dating journey now. I feel like feel I felt the safest with Asian men. Because there has been times where like I felt fetishized. Like I would just be walking down the street and a non-Asian man would be like, Asian persuasion, give me some of that. And I'm just like, like yeah, I feel like there's a level of safety I feel with Asian men, even though Asian men were the ones who also harmed me. Like I was in like a domestic violent relationship. And then after that, I knew I wanted a break from relationships. So I started dating and I only used apps. I think when I was in New York, there was Tinder during that time, Coffee Meets Bagel. Um, I think I used, and then I think the last one I used was Hinge. And my experiences was that um, yeah, I don't know. I was just dating to see what kind of men were out there because being from the Bay Area, I had like a string of like men who were kind of hype beast men who had like tattoos and things like that. And when I moved to New York, there wasn't a lot of that. There was a lot of like banking men, and they were like totally different from who I normally dated in California. So I was willing to kind of test what my tastes were and what I was looking for. And I realized through my dating experiences is that I wanted to be with someone who was into their emotions and feelings. Like they were aware of that and they were willing to improve on themselves. So like when I met my husband and he said he went to therapy, that was like a green flag for me because I know being Asians, like when I told my mom that I was going to therapy, she was like, "You don't need therapy. Like I can tell you exactly what to do." Like there's like a
Right.
stigma.
Mhm.
So when my husband said he went to therapy, that was such a green flag for me because I'm like, okay, what that signals to me is that he's willing to work on himself. He's willing to look in the dark closet and look at his shadows and like really inspect what's going on in there. And what that tells me is that what I assume, which is still true, is that he's willing to work on our relationship when things hit the fan. And he's willing to like talk about the dark sides because I feel like that's important. So like I don't want to hide anything from each other because I had divorced parents and I just didn't want us to hide anything from each other. And I wanted us to be willing to have that open communication no matter how hard things get.
Yeah. So what were some must-haves and some of the deal breakers? And I know you mentioned the nice stuff in between. Like
Mm,
what were some of the guides that you used to find him?
yeah. So yeah, what we were talking about earlier, I made a list of like the five must-haves, and I learned this method from Shan Boody, but the five must-haves and then like nice to haves were like however many I wanted to put on that list. And then the hard no's. I don't remember exactly what it was that was on my list, but I know for like my must-haves is that someone who was in like tune into their emotions, someone who spoke my love language. I think I also said something about like financially stable. Um, and and that was important to me because my parents had a lot of money problems. So, and I know I saw a statistic that like over 50% of Americans are divorced due to finances. So I was like, I know I want that financial stability and our financial whatever to be in alignment because I'm a saver. And I don't remember my other two, but like nice to haves were like I mean, oh, and also I'm probably sure my must have was also like must have like to cuddle because I do like to cuddle. And yeah, and then nice to haves, I don't even remember what was on that list, but I just went crazy with that part. I was like, need to get along with my friends, like must like animals, I don't know, like open-minded, growth mindset, all sorts of stuff could go in that category. My hard nose, I don't remember exactly what was on it, but I remember like I know I put cannot be a smoker and cannot if they're unkind to people. Like if they're just mean to random people, like that was a hard no for me. Yeah, and I don't remember what else was on that list.
So does that mean that, Vivian, when you go out on dates with the men before you met your husband, that you would see how they would react in a restaurant, see how they would treat strangers at a bar, see how they would treat the janitor or whatever? And like, so you were internally judging them or being aware of their actions?
Yeah, like just being aware of that because I think automatically if they're cruel to people, that was a hard no for me. Um, that was definitely a hard no. And I was definitely paying attention all the time on dates. And if just something didn't feel right with me intuitively, and I had to learn to listen to my intuition as well. If it just doesn't feel right, then it's not right. Um, and just learning to listen to that part of myself.
Yeah. Yeah, when you said financial stability, that is tricky because if you meet someone so young, you don't know if they're going to be financially stable or ambitious, or how do you know what their spending habits are going to be?
Mm,
How do you gauge that? Because I guess I am kind of lucky. I fell into my husband and I, we both don't believe in having credit card debt. We both don't believe in having car payments. Like we're both pretty much aligned now, but we've been together 16 years. But way back then, I didn't know what the way he uses money or the way he values money. So how did you make sure he was financially stable, and did you just make sure he didn't like spend above his means, or you made sure that he was okay having a conversation about money? Like
mm.
how did you figure that out?
Oh, that's tricky. Well, he actually already had a condo, I think, and he just sold it and then he just bought a bigger house when we first started dating. And he had told me that he bought this bigger house so that he can house his father. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, since you are kind of taking care of your father financially, somewhat financially, then there has to hopefully there's a level of responsibility there. And buying a house in California, there has to be some savings to save up for a down payment, all the things that goes into buying a house, like a good credit score, those things. I'm just like, so I assumed, like, hopefully, I mean, I know assume correctly now that he's more responsible with finances than, like, say, my father was. And and then when we had money talk, like, conversations, and actually he's the one who would prefer to talk more about finances than I am. And when we were still dating, he was the one who encouraged me to refinance my student loans, because he was just really bothered by my high interest rates. So that also made me feel secure. Just him, like, knowing about interest rates and things like that. Because I was also like, I had to learn, like, about finances myself as well. But just that little more information that he had, that was really helpful for me. It made me feel secure financially.
Yeah, yeah. Just on the topic of finances, I mean, I've just been like going down a rabbit hole listening to Dave Ramsey talk about money and finances and how people call in and they're like, we're 500 or we're $50,000 in debt or we're $180,000 in debt. And I'm like, wow, how did you get that much in debt? And it's crazy what the American society is like. And hopefully people look at this stuff more. Like, I love when you were rattling off your must haves or your nice to haves or your deal breakers. That Vivian, you didn't mention height. And I so appreciate that. As a matchmaker, I'm so sick of people talking about that. But instead of height, I hope women listening to this are like, you know what? I do want a guy who has good credit. I do want a guy who's responsible with his finances that can maybe afford a house in California or anywhere in the US. And to buy a house before 30, I assume, you told me the ages of you guys, those are wonderful things to find in a guy to build a future together. And those things are important. Being nice to a server, being nice to the people around you, because if they're kind to strangers, they're probably going to be kind to you when you're dating. So yeah, I totally appreciate your deal breakers and your nice to haves and your no that didn't include anything superficial. So good for you. And I hope, women and men out there listening realizes, yeah, like to really have a beautiful relationship with someone, it's communication, it's how to fight effectively and how to be considerate of different things and holidays or saying I'm sorry in a right way or in a timely way or affection and all those things. So yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, Vivian, I appreciate your time, but before I let you go, will you tell me some dating tips that you want to give to the listeners because you have a really solid relationship with your husband and it seems like you guys are on the right path to, defying the odds of the divorce numbers and all that. So, what are a couple dating tips you can leave us with?
Hmm. I mean, I would echo what you just said about don't go for the superficial things, the glitz, the glams. Don't go for that. Go for who do you want to sit next to when you're like 80 years old with your fur babies or your grandkids if you want them. Like, who do you want to sit next to when you're 80 years old, when you're like sagging and you don't look anything like you look now? Two, like, listen to your intuition. If you have a hard time accessing your intuition, do practices like we talked about meditation, that helps, yoga, that helps. Like, tap into your intuition and your body's wisdom for what feels good. Like, who do you feel good around and who do you just don't feel good around, but on paper they're great. But for some reason, there's like that little voice inside of you that's like, nah, that's not right. So follow that, like, listen to what that is. And I would say also have fun. Like, if the date's not going well, just use that time together to know another human on a human to human level. Like, have fun dating and enjoy yourself. And just if like if it's going well, great. But if it's not, yeah, just getting to know, use it as a chance to just get to know someone you wouldn't have gotten to know otherwise.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I do tell people if you can't sit on a date for 60 minutes or 90 minutes, like you're a horrible person. Like just be nice to somebody for 60 minutes or 90 minutes. And even if
Yeah,
you know he's not going to be the love of your life or your husband or whatever, just have fun, right? Get to know him, see what's going on, all that good stuff. So, well, thank you
yeah.
so much, Vivian. I will put all of your show information in the show notes, how people can get in touch with you if they need your help or want your help. They should. I love the fact that your husband was open to therapy. Like those green flags are what we need to look for, right? In a relationship. Like, what are some other green flags that you can think about, audience, that would make you want to pursue this person or give them a fair chance? Like at least 3 dates, I would think. So, well, thank you so much, Vivian, for your time. And for the ladies out there, if you're single, I would love for you to fill out a profile with me at twoasianmatchmakers.com. That way I can find you and set you up with some great guys that I have that I'm always working on, men across the US who want to date Asian women. Hopefully you will contact me and I will see you next time. Thank you, Vivian, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having
Bye.
me.
Thank you.